She was sold as a bride of debt. The cowboy said, "Then let me pay it with forever." The sun hung low over the red dunes of planet Iridian, casting long shadows across the endless desert. The wind carried fine, rust-colored sand that stung the skin like tiny needles. In the distance, a lone figure struggled along the rocky trail. She was a young woman named Leora, her face dusty and eyes wary. Her hands clutched a worn satchel, and her heart thumped with fear. Her family had fallen into debt to a local crime lord, and now she'd been sold as a bride to pay what they owed. The men who had escorted her to the border of the colony jeered and whispered, treating her like an object, like property. She kept her head low, trying to make herself as small as possible. She had grown up strong, but the cruelty of people could still make her tremble. They had taken everything from her home, her freedom, even her name in a way. And she could only hope that someone, somewhere, would see her as more than a commodity. Meanwhile, across the dunes, a different figure moved with purpose. Cale, a cowboy of the frontier, rode a hovering hoverbike that hummed softly beneath him. His wide-brimmed hat shaded a rugged face, and a long duster coat flapped in the wind. He carried his twin pistols at his sides, though he preferred to avoid violence unless it was necessary. Cale was known across the settlements for his fairness and skill. People said he was a man who carried the weight of the stars on his shoulders, haunted by a past he rarely spoke of. As Cale rode, his eyes scanned the horizon. He had been tracking a group of outlaws who had been raiding water shipments, but something in the movement of the sand caught his attention. A shadow darted near the rocky ridges, a figure running, stumbling, clearly in distress. His instincts told him to investigate. He arrived just in time to see Leora being forced onto a hovering transport by two men in black jackets with glowing insignias. Their weapons were crude laser pistols, but they were trained, and their intent was clear. Cale's jaw tightened. He had seen injustice before, and he had learned that hesitation could cost lives. With a sharp twist of his wrist, Cale activated his hoverbike's propulsion, sending him skimming across the sand toward the transport. He drew one of his pistols and fired a shot that pierced the metal near the wheel, causing the transport to wobble and veer. The men cursed and fired back, but Cale was fast. He dodged the blasts, using the bike's maneuvering thrusters to his advantage. Leora froze, unsure whether to run or hide. Her fear was a weight in her chest, but when she saw the cowboy leap from the bike and roll to the transport, something inside her shifted. There was a presence in him, a calm authority, a promise that he would not let harm come to her. Cale moved with precision, disabling the guards' weapons without killing them. He kicked one back into the sand and used the edge of his coat to knock the other unconscious. Then he reached for Leora, offering her a hand. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but steady. But the desperation in her eyes, the uncertainty in her posture, spoke louder than words. She took his hand, and he pulled her to safety behind a rock outcrop. "They'll come after you again," he said. "Do you have anywhere to go?" Her home was gone, her family indebted, and she had no friends here in the desert. She felt the weight of her chains, invisible but crushing. Cale looked at her closely. He could see the fire in her eyes, despite the fear. She was not a weak woman. She was someone who had survived more than most could imagine. That recognition made him resolve something in his heart. "I'll pay your debt," he said, his tone firm. "And not just for a night, not just to buy you from them. You'll have your freedom. You'll have a home." Leora blinked, stunned. Her mind tried to understand his words. They sounded too good to be true. How could a stranger, a lone cowboy, offer what no one else had? How could someone step into a world that had been cruel to her and simply promise safety and freedom? Cale saw her doubt and added, "But you have to trust me. Can you do that?" She swallowed hard and nodded. It wasn't easy. Trust was something that had been broken and sold long ago, but something about Cale's presence, the way he moved and spoke, inspired a fragile hope. The desert around them was quiet, but danger lingered. Cale could see the faint glimmer of drone sensors approaching, sent to track Leora back to the crime lord. He motioned for her to follow. "Stay close," he instructed. "And don't make any sudden moves. They're fast, but we can be faster." Together they ran across the dunes, Cale leading the way with a knowledge of the terrain that came from years of wandering the frontier. He pointed out safe paths, crevices, and rocky ridges that could hide them from prying eyes. Leora followed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. As they moved, she began to speak, cautiously at first, about her family and the circumstances that had led to this moment. Cale listened, never interrupting, giving her space to speak without judgment. He could feel her pain, but also her resilience. She was not just a victim, she was a survivor, and he respected that deeply. By the time night fell, the desert had transformed. The sky was a deep purple, studded with stars that looked closer than they should. Cale led Leora to a small ravine, a natural shelter that would hide them from drones and wandering patrols. The air was cooler here, and the sounds of the desert softened to the distant hum of sand and wind. Cale set down a small supply kit from his bike. It was basic: water rations, dehydrated food, and a few medical supplies. He handed Leora a water packet. "Drink," he said. "You'll need your strength." She accepted it, her hands trembling slightly. She realized that she had been so focused on fear that she hadn't allowed herself to think about survival. For the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of safety. Cale looked at her, his expression serious. "We're not safe yet," he warned. "The crime lord won't let this go easily. But I promised you freedom, and I don't break promises. Tomorrow we'll find a way to settle this debt for good." Leora's eyes met his, and in that moment she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not just the wishful kind, but the steady kind that could grow with effort and courage. She nodded, silently acknowledging his words. As night fully fell, they huddled together in the shelter, the stars above them stretching endlessly. The desert seemed less menacing under the quiet sky, less empty, less cruel. Cale kept watch, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, while Leora tried to rest, though sleep was difficult with worry still heavy in her chest. In the silence, Cale thought about the promise he had made. Paying her debt was just the first step. There would be more challenges ahead: the crime lord, the desert dangers, and the uncertainty of a new life. But he also knew something important. Leora was not someone to be saved. She was someone to stand with. And that realization made him resolve to protect her, not just for a moment, but for as long as he could. By the first light of dawn, the desert would awake again, harsh and unforgiving. But for now, under the vast star-studded sky, a cowboy and a woman who had been sold as a bride shared a fragile, tentative trust. And in that trust, a seed of something more: freedom, courage, and perhaps even love, had begun to grow. The desert was quiet, but the danger never truly left. Cale and Leora moved carefully, their eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the crime lord's men. Cale's hoverbike hummed softly as he led her toward the nearest settlement, a small cluster of domed buildings that rose like shadows against the rocky cliffs. The place was neutral ground, a hub for traders, wanderers, and anyone who wanted to disappear from the lawless stretches of Iridian. "Keep your head low," Cale whispered, guiding her along a narrow canyon path. "Once we're in the settlement, we can figure out our next step, but outside, it's still dangerous. They'll be watching." Leora nodded, adjusting the strap of her satchel. Her hands trembled, not just from the fear of pursuit, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being protected. For days, she had been alone, powerless, a pawn in someone else's game. Now, for the first time, someone had offered her a choice, and she wasn't sure how to accept it. They reached the edge of the settlement as the sun began to rise, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and crimson. Cale slowed his bike, keeping an eye out for patrol drones hovering in the distance. Leora's eyes widened as she took in the sight: domed buildings with metal walkways connecting them, solar collectors spinning slowly on the roofs, and neon lights flickering in the shaded corners. The settlement was a mix of old and new, rustic wood beams alongside sleek metal surfaces. It looked like a place that had survived both the desert and time. "We'll be safe here for a while," Cale said, "but I need to make sure your debt is settled properly. If I just pay off the local collectors, the crime lord will still have a reason to come after you." "Do you really think he'll let me go?" she asked quietly. "After everything, after selling me, after—" Her voice broke off. Cale placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "I won't let him. And I won't let anyone else use you as a tool. You're not a possession. You're a person, and you deserve a chance to live free." She looked at him, searching for any hint of false promise, but found none. His eyes were steady, determined. Something inside her stirred: cautious hope, fragile but real. The first order of business was finding someone in the settlement who could help. Cale led her to a small cantina where traders and miners gathered. The air smelled of metal, dust, and roasted protein bars. A few locals eyed them with curiosity but said nothing. Cale approached the counter, where a tall man with cybernetic arms polished glasses. "I need information," Cale said, keeping his voice calm. "The crime lord Varik Solon, he controls this region. I need to know how to reach him, negotiate, or settle debts. Anything." The man glanced at Leora, then back at Cale. You're brave walking in here asking about Solon. Most people pay and pray he doesn't notice them. I'm not most people, Cale replied, his voice low but firm, and I'm not asking for myself. The man studied him for a moment, then sighed. Fine, he has a base near the Iron Ridge outpost, northwest of here. He's got guards, drones, and a few old bots he keeps active for show. If you want to approach him safely, you'll need a proper offer and someone with guts to stand by you. You're taking a big risk, stranger. Cale nodded. I know the risk. Thank you. Leaving the cantina, he turned to Leora. It won't be easy. He's clever, dangerous, and used to people bending to his will. We'll need a plan. Leora's throat felt tight, but she straightened her back. I'll help, she said. I may not be a marksman or a fighter like you, but I won't be a liability. Cale smiled faintly, impressed by her courage. Good. That attitude might just save our lives. They spent the morning preparing. Cale checked his pistols, the hoverbike, and the small tools he carried in his satchel. Leora gathered supplies, water, dehydrated food, and a few medical kits. They moved cautiously, keeping to shaded paths and avoiding open terrain. The desert sun climbed higher, making the red sands shimmer like fire. By midday, they reached the edge of the Iron Ridge outpost. The crime lord's base was partially built into the cliffs, a mixture of natural rock and metal plating. Guard drones hovered at intervals, scanning the area with bright blue beams. Cale's eyes narrowed. This would not be a simple negotiation, but he had faced danger before and survived, relying on skill, intelligence, and timing. Stay close, he whispered to Leora, and follow my lead. They approached on foot, using natural ridges and shadows to remain unseen. Cale activated a small device that jammed minor drone signals, creating a temporary blind spot in their sensors. Leora watched him work, realizing that his calm under pressure was not arrogance. It was experience, honed over years of survival in the desert frontier. When they reached the base entrance, Cale took a deep breath and stepped forward. Leora followed, her heart pounding. They were about to face a man who had taken everything from her, who had sold her as if she were property. And yet she felt a strange strength beside her. Cale had promised freedom, and somehow that promise made her feel less alone. The entrance was guarded by two men with energy rifles. Cale approached, keeping his hands visible. We have business with Varric Solon, he said. It's important. The guards looked them over, skeptical. You got an appointment? One of them asked. Consider this your appointment, Cale replied. We're here to settle a debt. The guards glanced at each other, then gestured for them to follow. Leora's stomach nodded, but she stayed close, trusting Cale's judgment. Inside, the base was dimly lit, lined with metal walls and holographic displays. Servos hummed, and distant mechanical sounds echoed through the corridors. At the end of the hallway, a large chamber opened. Varric Solon sat on a raised platform, a commanding figure with cybernetic enhancements along his arms and neck. His eyes glowed faintly, scanning the room with calculated precision. Around him, guards and drones formed a semicircle, watching Cale and Leora with cold attention. You've come far, Varric said, his voice smooth, almost hypnotic. But why should I let you settle a debt, especially for someone I've already claimed? Cale squared his shoulders. Because I'm offering a fair exchange, and because she deserves freedom. Not just as a transaction, but as a right. Varric's cybernetic eye whirred as he studied them. You're brave, or foolish, perhaps both. Explain your offer. Cale pulled out a small data chip from his satchel and placed it on the table. Tech, anything to clear her family's debt, enough to satisfy your ledger and prove I mean business. And nothing more. She stays free. Varric leaned forward, intrigued but cautious. And why should I trust you? What's to stop you from taking her and disappearing? Cale looked directly at Leora, then back at Varric. Because I've made a promise. And I keep promises. If you try to break it, you'll see what happens when someone defends the right of another. I'm not just asking. I'm warning. Varric studied him, then leaned back, a slow smirk forming. Interesting. You have fire. Perhaps there is more to this cowboy than I thought. Very well. I'll accept your offer, but know this. The desert is not kind to fools. Make sure you honor your words. Kyle nodded, relief flashing briefly. Leora exhaled, tension leaving her body for the first time in days. She realized that freedom was no longer just a dream. It was possible. And the man who had promised it was standing beside her, steady, unwavering, determined. As they left the base, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert. Leora glanced at Cale. You really did it, she said softly. You kept your word.
We're not at it.
For now, you're free. For the first time in her life, Leora felt something she hadn't felt in a long while. Hope. And beside her, she sensed the promise of protection, partnership, and perhaps even trust. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, harsh and unforgiving, but with Cale by her side, it felt possible to survive. Together, they rode toward the unknown, ready to face whatever the frontier held, and ready to build a life that was truly theirs. The desert stretched endlessly, a harsh sea of red sand and jagged rocks. Cale guided Leora along a winding canyon path, the hoverbike hovering just above the ground. The wind whipped against their faces, carrying fine grains of sand that stung like needles. Yet for Leora, the fear that had shadowed her life seemed lighter now. She was free, or at least she was free in this moment. And Cale was there beside her, steady, unflinching, like a guardian who had crossed countless dangers and survived. "Where are we headed?" Leora asked, her voice barely audible over the wind. "To a safe point beyond the desert," Cale replied. "There's an abandoned mining outpost. Not much left, but it's off the usual routes. We can rest, plan, and keep moving without anyone spotting us." Leora nodded, gripping the straps of her satchel tightly. She tried to focus on the rhythm of the ride, the hum of the hoverbike, and the strange beauty of the desert. The sands stretched like molten metal under the sun, shimmering and shifting with each gust of wind. Alien plants clung stubbornly to the cliffs, their soft glow faint in the harsh light. It was a dangerous, unforgiving land, but it was alive. Hours passed as they rode, the sun climbing higher, then dipping toward the horizon. Cale kept a sharp eye on the terrain. He knew the desert's tricks: hidden sinkholes, shifting dunes, and rogue drones left behind by long-forgotten miners. He adjusted their path constantly, moving them through the safest routes. "Do you ever get tired of this?" Leora asked, breaking the silence. "Riding, surviving, always looking over your shoulder?" Cale glanced at her, a faint shadow of a smile on his rugged face. "I used to, but you learn to take it one step, or one dune, at a time. And some things make it worth the effort." Leora looked at him, curiosity flickering. "Some things?" He didn't answer immediately, only focused on the path ahead. But she could see the weight in his eyes, the memories he carried silently. She didn't press. Some truths, she thought, revealed themselves only when the time was right. As the sun began to dip behind the jagged mountains, they spotted the mining outpost. It was little more than a skeleton of metal and stone, partially collapsed in some places, but still functional. Cale guided the hoverbike carefully, setting it down in the shadow of a collapsed wall. "Here," he said, scanning the area. "We'll be safe for the night. Not completely hidden, but enough to rest and plan." Leora stepped down, her legs stiff from hours of riding. She took in the scene: rusted machinery, abandoned control panels, and the faint hum of a solar generator that still worked. Somehow, amidst the ruin, it felt like a sanctuary. Cale set up a small fire using a portable unit. The light flickered against the metal walls, casting long shadows. Leora settled nearby, watching him work. The desert outside seemed endless and quiet, but here, in this small refuge, there was a fragile sense of peace. "Tomorrow, we need to decide our next step," Cale said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Solon won't forget that I paid your debt. He may try to send someone after us." Leora frowned, worry knotting her stomach. "And if he does, then we'll deal with it, together." The words stirred something deep inside her, a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Not safety, exactly, but a sense of being seen, being protected, and not being alone. She realized slowly that Cale wasn't just a protector. He was someone who believed in her, even when the world had not. The night passed with quiet moments and small conversations. Leora shared stories of her childhood on the frontier, of the hardships her family faced, and of the dreams she had once allowed herself to imagine. Cale listened, never interrupting, offering advice only when asked. She noticed small details about him, too. The careful way he cleaned his pistols, the way he watched the horizon even when resting, the faint sadness behind his eyes. By dawn, they were ready to continue. Cale had repaired the hoverbike, double-checked supplies, and scouted a route that would take them through rocky terrain before crossing a canyon known for its sandstorms. As they moved, the desert revealed its dangers. Small drones, left behind by other settlers or scavengers, buzzed past, scanning for movement. Cale disabled them swiftly, using a compact EMP device. Leora helped, holding the scanner and passing tools when needed. She was learning quickly, her fear giving way to a quiet determination. Hours later, they reached a narrow canyon, the path twisting and dropping steeply. Suddenly, the wind shifted. Leora froze as a wall of red sand rushed toward them, carried by a sandstorm that seemed to appear from nowhere. Cale's hoverbike shook, and the desert around them became a blur. "Hold on!" Cale shouted, gripping the controls tightly. Leora braced herself, feeling the storm lash against her face. The sand stung, but the bike's shielded cockpit protected them enough to survive. They moved slowly, inch by inch, until the worst of the storm passed. When the air cleared, they found themselves in a narrow alcove, hidden from view. Cale exhaled, finally allowing a small smile. "Not the easiest way through," he said, brushing sand from his coat. Leora laughed softly, a sound that startled even her. "You make it seem like an adventure," she said. "I'd be terrified without you." Cale glanced at her, eyes serious. "You're braver than you know. You've kept up this far, and you've helped more than you realize." For a moment, silence fell between them, the weight of the desert around them. Leora felt something shift, a subtle bond forming, one of trust and partnership. She realized that she didn't just admire Cale for his skill and courage. She admired him for his heart, the way he stood for justice, and the way he saw her as more than just a girl sold to pay a debt. They continued their journey, moving through abandoned settlements and rocky ridges, avoiding patrols and scavengers. Along the way, Leora proved herself more than capable. She helped repair the hoverbike after a minor mechanical failure, and even spotted a trap left by scavengers that Cale had nearly missed. Each moment of shared struggle built trust, and with it, an unspoken connection. By late afternoon, they spotted a ridge that overlooked a valley. The view was breathtaking, a river carved through the red rock, glinting like liquid silver, with alien plants glowing faintly along the banks. Cale guided the hoverbike down carefully, landing near a small pool of water. Leora breathed deeply, letting the beauty of the place wash over her. "We can rest here," Cale said. "It's short-term safety, but it'll do." As Leora knelt by the water, filling her canteen, she glanced at Cale. "Why do you do this?" she asked softly. "Why help me, a stranger, risk yourself for someone you barely know?" Cale paused, looking out over the valley. "Because someone helped me once," he said quietly. "And because I believe that what's right matters more than fear. You're not a burden, Leora. You're worth it." The words made her chest tighten. She wanted to trust him, to believe in him, but her past had taught her caution. Still, something in Cale's gaze, the unwavering strength, the honesty, made her dare to hope. Night fell, and the desert transformed under the stars. They set up a small camp near the river, the hoverbike secured and weapons within reach. Leora sat close to Cale, the firelight flickering across their faces. The air was calm now, the sandstorm long gone, leaving only the soft hum of the desert night. Cale spoke quietly, telling her stories of the frontier, of old legends, of places he had seen. Leora listened, captivated. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months, maybe years, and for the first time since her debt had been sold, she felt like she was not just surviving, but living. As they settled down to sleep, Leora realized that the desert, harsh and unforgiving as it was, had also become a place of beginnings. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Solon's men could still follow. But for now she was safe, she was free, and she was not alone. Beside her, Cale kept watch, silent, vigilant, and unwavering. And in that silence, a quiet promise lingered. That whatever the desert, whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face it together. For the first time in a long while, Leora let herself believe in something more than survival. She allowed herself to believe in hope, trust, and perhaps even something like the possibility of love. The desert morning was cold, the wind carrying a sharp chill over the red dunes. Cale and Leora packed their small camp in silence, both alert to every sound. The sand had shifted overnight, erasing footprints, but Cale knew it would not hide them for long. Somewhere beyond the canyon, Varric Solon's eyes, or his drones, could already be searching for them. "We need to move fast," Cale said, his voice low and steady. "Solon will not let this go. He'll come himself if necessary." Leora adjusted her satchel and nodded, her heart tight with both fear and determination. "Then we face him together," she said. Her voice had a quiet steel that made Cale glance at her with a mixture of pride and caution. They moved through a narrow pass, the canyon walls towering on each side. Cale guided the hoverbike with skill, dodging loose rocks and sudden drops. Leora stayed close, learning to trust the rhythm of the ride and the flow of the desert. They were partners now, each reliant on the other. As the sun rose higher, the distant glint of metal caught Cale's eye. He froze, scanning the horizon. "We're spotted," he said. "Solon's scouts. We'll have to confront them, or we won't make it to the valley." The scouts were not many. 3 men in sleek black armor, armed with energy rifles and drones hovering above their heads. Cale brought the hoverbike to a stop behind a rocky outcrop. "We can take them," he said, checking his pistols. "Follow my lead and don't panic." She had never fired a weapon in her life, yet something inside her urged her to act. Cale had taught her how to stay calm, how to watch, how to be aware. Her courage, once buried under fear, rose to meet the moment. Cale stepped out, pistols drawn. The scouts hesitated, wary of the cowboy who had single-handedly defeated their men before. Leora followed, staying behind cover but ready to act. A tense standoff followed. The scouts raised their weapons, but Cale was faster, moving with precision. He disabled 2 drones with quick bursts from his pistol and used the terrain to his advantage, forcing the scouts into a narrow choke point. Leora watched, heart pounding, as he moved fluidly, combining skill, strategy, and instinct. One scout tried to flank them, but Leora's voice rang out. "Watch out." Cale pivoted, firing a non-lethal blast that knocked the scout back. Leora's quick thinking had saved him. He nodded at her, a flicker of pride in his eyes. She was not just along for the ride, she was part of the fight. The scouts, realizing they were outmatched, retreated into the desert, their drones disabled. Cale exhaled, lowering his pistols. "Good work," he said, his voice calm but edged with tension. "We're not done yet." The valley lay ahead, a hidden refuge of alien flora and glinting water channels. It was a place that few dared to reach, a perfect location for the final confrontation. Cale guided the hoverbike down the slopes, the wind whipping past them. Leora's stomach tightened, not with fear this time, but anticipation. She could sense the coming storm, the showdown with the man who had sold her, who had threatened her freedom. At the entrance to the valley they saw him, Varik Solon, standing with a small army of guards and drones. His cybernetic enhancements glinted in the sunlight, giving him an almost otherworldly presence. He smiled, cold and calculated. "So, the cowboy and his prize arrive," he said. "I warned you, but you insisted on defiance." Cale stepped forward, placing himself between Leora and Solon. "She's not your prize," he said. "And I'm not here to negotiate anymore. You've had your chance." Solon's laughter echoed across the canyon. Brave words. Let's see if they hold up. The battle began suddenly. Guards advanced with energy rifles, drones buzzed overhead, and Solon activated a small force field around himself. Cale moved with precision, firing carefully to disable drones and disarm guards without unnecessary harm. Leora stayed close, using the environment to her advantage. She hurled rocks at drone sensors, disrupted mechanical systems, and even helped Cale maneuver around traps set by Solon. Time seemed to stretch as they fought. Cale's calm skill complemented Leora's quick thinking, forming a partnership that Solon had not anticipated. One by one, the guards were disabled, the drones fell from the sky, and the force field flickered under repeated pressure. Solon's expression darkened. "You are persistent," he said, activating a blade-like weapon attached to his cybernetic arm. He lunged at Cale, fast and precise. Cale dodged narrowly, avoiding the strike, and countered with a well-placed shot that forced Solon back. Leora saw her chance and used a portable EMP device to overload Solon's remaining drones, leaving him isolated. Breathing heavily, Cale faced Solon. "It's over," he said. "No one touches her. Not you, not anyone." Solon's glare was sharp, but he realized the fight was lost. Slowly, he backed away, signaling his remaining men to retreat. The valley was quiet once more, the only sounds the wind and the soft hum of alien flora. She was standing tall, hands on her hips, hair dusted with sand. "You did well," he said. "Better than I expected." Leora felt a surge of pride. She had survived, contributed, and faced the man who had tried to control her life. And through it all, she had not been alone. Cale had been there, guiding, protecting, and trusting her. As the sun began to dip behind the mountains, Cale and Leora found a safe spot near a flowing stream. They dismounted the hoverbike and sat together, letting the adrenaline fade. Leora dipped her hands into the cool water, the desert heat forgotten for a moment. Cale watched her, thoughtful. "You've changed," he said quietly. From the girl I met in the dunes, you've grown into someone strong, brave, and sharp. Leora smiled faintly, looking up at him. I had a good teacher, she said softly. He shook his head. No. You did this yourself. I just made sure you didn't get buried under the desert. For a moment, silence fell between them. The desert around them was quiet, the danger gone, leaving only the soft murmur of water and the distant call of alien birds. Leora felt something stir inside her, gratitude, relief, and a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Cale spoke again, more softly this time. I promised you freedom, and I meant it. But I also promised more. I promised a life, not just survival. Leora turned to him, eyes searching. A life? She asked. Yes, Cale said. A home. Safety. And if you'll allow it, someone to share it with. Her chest tightened. She had dreamed of freedom, but never of someone standing beside her, offering a place, a future, a partnership. And yet, here it was, offered not as a favor, but as a promise. Leora hesitated, then nodded. I want that too. I trust you, Cale. He reached for her hand, and she took it, fingers interlacing. The gesture was simple, yet it carried the weight of all they had endured together. It was trust, protection, and the first step towards something more. The desert night fell, the stars blazing above them like countless distant fires. Cale and Leora sat together, the hoverbike resting nearby, the valley around them safe, for now. The trials of the day had ended, but the promise of the future had just begun. In the distance, the desert stretched endlessly, harsh and unforgiving, but it no longer seemed insurmountable. With each other, they could face whatever the frontier offered. Sandstorms, rogue drones, and the echoes of past enemies could not break what had begun here. A partnership forged in danger, trust, and courage. As they prepared to rest, Leora whispered, You kept your word. You promised me freedom. And you delivered. Cale's hand squeezed hers gently. I promised you more than freedom, he said. I promised you a life, and I intend to keep that promise for forever. And under the vast desert sky, with the stars stretching across the horizon, Leora realized she believed him. She believed in freedom, in trust, and in a life that was theirs to build together. The cowboy had paid her debt not just with credits, but with something far more valuable. Protection, respect, and a promise of forever. The desert wind shifted softly, carrying the scent of alien blooms and the distant sound of flowing water. For Cale and Leora, the frontier was no longer a place of fear. It was a place of beginnings. Together they could face whatever came next, side by side, forever free.